Um,
Right.
Welcome back to the Supervision Summit, What It Takes, Supervising Peer Support Specialists and Advocates. I'm Rita Cronice. I'm one of the co-directors for the Peer Support Services Technical Assistance Center, known as PeerTAC, and we're really delighted to have everybody here this afternoon. I want to give a really warm welcome to our presenters, but I want to do a couple of housekeeping details to start with. And first of all, I want in this session, your microphones will be muted and your cameras will be off to eliminate any background noises and distractions. But we encourage you to use the chat box to comment, and say hello and say who you are and where you are and what you do. So that's really great. So go ahead and let us know where you are in the chat. The session is being recorded, and the link for the recording, presentation slides, and any handouts that come from this will be posted on the PeerTAC website, likely within 30 days. If you lose your connection or accidentally leave the Zoom room, please choose the link next to the title in your program. I'm guessing you all know about the program by now, so just click that link to rejoin the session. If you're seeking continuing education credit for this session, you can't use a phone. So if you're trying to dial in by phone, you will not be eligible for continuing education. You'll need to actually click the link and sign in. The continuing education credit will be given for CPRP, LMSW, LCSW, LMHS, and New York Certified Peer Specialist. And you will receive instructions by email for what you need to complete for that, but mostly a workshop evaluation. And that will go for the keynote and this session because this session goes right into the keynote. So the keynote is really the session you'll be evaluating, but what we're doing next is going to be for information. So we encourage you to complete the evaluation, whether or not you're looking for continuing education, but you will need to complete that evaluation within 48 hours if you are seeking continuing education. So with that, I'm going to switch over. Next slide, Casey. I'm going to switch over and just give a really warm welcome to the National Association of Peer Supporters. Our representatives here in New York are Casey Carpenter and Yvette Pate. And originally Amanda Sake was going to do the introduction, and I actually wish she was doing the introduction because a lot of this particular initiative, as well as PeerTAC, was her vision and Regina Schoen, who both did a lot of work early on to make sure that we created something that would be supportive not only of the peer specialists as the NYPAN initiative is, but also the employers that are bringing peer support services in, and to make it across the lifespan, because a lot of attention and focus have been given to the adult population, but we really need to make sure that we're addressing the needs of the youth peer advocates and the family peer advocates as well. So the partnership with Families Together and the New York University McSilver Institute, with our help with the Academy of Peer Services at Rutgers, kind of brought all of the PeerTAC together. This was a sister companion initiative. The NYPAN was a companion initiative that was really geared towards the needs of the peer support workforce itself. And I'm going to let them tell you a whole lot more about that. So with that, I'm going to just please give a warm welcome to Casey Carpenter, who's the coordinator, and Yvette Pate, who's the director of this initiative. And go ahead and take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And Rita, thank you so much for that warm welcome and introduction. I really greatly appreciate it. And this has been an amazing event to date. I've been here since the beginning. I'm just filled up. So I want to go ahead and get ready to start telling you a bit about NYPAN, and we are a project of the National Association of Peer Supporters. You'll hear me refer to that as N.A.P.S. And N.A.P.S is synonymous with recovery. For many, many years, we have been leading the charge with um, wanting to do exactly what NYPAN is in existence to do. That is to advance peer support, to grow peer support. You'll see here our vision and our mission statements. We really do believe in this at the core of our being, and it really is synonymous with what we all are also moving forward with as we invest in the components of the NYPAN project. We want to see peer advancement. We want to have the opportunities for people to be able to experience peer support in a way that allows them to experience growth, such as the growth that I have experienced myself as a person in recovery and a peer since 2005. We want to see peer specialists and advocates in every aspect of healthcare throughout all of our communities throughout the United States. So we're going to move forward to the next slide. Just talk a little bit about the history of N.A.P.S. We were started in 2004 by a dedicated group of peer specialists in Michigan, and we later became N.A.P.S, which was the International Association of Peer Supporters. We wanted to reflect the increase in our international members, and we had a desire to include all peer supporters, not just those with the title. And we also became registered as a 5013C. Steve Harrington was very instrumental in getting and keeping us going through those times. And he also established a national conference around the United States, the first being held in 2006. Over the years, we've presented 41 webinars, 29 that are recorded and still available for anyone to watch. And members may take a quiz and receive certificates of contact hours. And you will also find that there's even more now to offer now that we've created our New York hub. The future of peer support. In 2019, we held our first in-person organizational strategic planning session in San Diego, California. This allowed us to individually and collectively reflect on our history and contemplate our organization's future. Following conversations regarding financial stability and organizational capacity, we humbly began the tough decision that N.A.P.S. currently lacked the capacity to be international, a professional organization. So to align more closely with the mission, we prioritized and developed a professional association of peer specialists by recruiting and uniting peer support workers as members of the professional organization that we know now as N.A.P.S. And our focus is to provide services to our members and promote the interest of peer specialists, and I would say peer specialists and advocates. And we will move to the next slide, please. So talking about the New York Peer Advancement Network, it's a really wonderful initiative, and it has, as Rita had mentioned earlier, we are working to make sure that we're inclusive of the lifespan. Our particular grant in this aspect is focused on the New York peer specialists, the New York certified peer specialists, the family peer advocates that are credentialed, as well as the youth peer advocates that are credentialed. We want to create a sense of unity. We want to connect at some point. We're beginning our mentoring program. And that was a vision that was shared with me that Celia Brown was very instrumental in expressing the desire that that be something that peers would benefit from. And we will be beginning that in June for training of mentors, June through July. And then the actual mentoring will take place July through October for our first cohort. We're having opportunities to create statewide networking meetings. We want to prompt inclusion and statewide opportunities for growth and development. That meeting takes place on the third Wednesday of every month. We had our very first one in February. We want that meeting to be something that's for our peer specialists and advocates, about our peer specialists and advocates, where their voices and what they want and need is included in the planning and the agenda and the creation of how we move forward with that. We also would love to be able to create opportunities for there to be a spotlight on individual roles so that each role can get to know the other that much more better, as well as to create more of a sense of unity amongst peer specialists and advocates. We want to create and cultivate highlight, peer pathways for specialists and advocates as well. We do that with the job board that we have. We also have opportunities for people to not just post jobs, but to also seek jobs. And we have a registry of peers who are listed there. So employers can also look and see who's registered under N.A.P.S. in our specific New York hub, what their titles are, and what they may have to offer if they're looking for hiring in any of those particular positions. So we also want to increase access to peer specialists and advocates job boards by having that job opportunities, pardon me, by doing that. We are also working on developing workforce training and development. We're seeking subject matter experts. We're creating a learning management system within that hub, which is in development, to be able to have people have opportunities to go to that particular resource and find things that are relevant to their professional growth and development. We also, as N.A.P.S. has led the charge in this, we want to make sure that we ensure always in everything we do, we want to ensure the fidelity to the peer support values by enforcing, well, not enforcing, but reiterating and sharing our practice guidelines with everyone, and creating an advisory board. And that advisory board will help to assist us in promoting that level of accountability, as well as helping to ensure that certain policies are pushed forward as we continue to seek more opportunities for peer specialists and advocates to grow. And we want this to happen in ways that don't necessarily have to occur in the way that my journey occurred. I felt that when I became certified in 2005, advancement wasn't available if I didn't seek further education. So we want to be able to create opportunities where people don't necessarily have to go into debt in order to realize the opportunities that should be available naturally for peer specialists and advocates. Next slide, please. So our deliverables, some of the deliverables that NYPAN is charged with maintaining and moving forward is that interactive job board. We have created that thanks to our web manager, Joel McDonald. He is very, very instrumental in creating. He is so amazing when it comes to, we express something that we need, and he is able to just be like a wizard and just create these interactive things on our job board. I'm so appreciative that when I express something to him, he's able to create it in such a way that meets our goals and deliverables. We are continuing to work towards establishing the networking meeting across the lifespan. We created a hub of resources for continuing education and learning, which is something that I was mentioning before. We are seeking subject matter experts. If you find yourself to be that, please do not hesitate to reach out to us so that we can work with you in order to push forward this part of our deliverable and provide opportunities for New York Certified Peer Specialists, family peer advocates, as well as youth peer advocates. We want to make sure that the Learning Hub is inclusive of the needs of each across the lifespan. And that is very, very important. We're going to establish our advisory board to advance the agendas relevant to peer specialists and advocates. And we also will be establishing, as I mentioned, the mentorship program. We would love to be able through that to cultivate leadership and sustainability for professional advancement. And we truly believe that, especially with this very first cohort, as we complete that cohort, the goal and the hope is that we'll be able to have those individuals who were mentors be able to use that as something they can add to their resume. We will also be looking forward to training them to be trainers for the next round of mentors, possibly, as well as that those who will be mentors will find themselves in stronger positions in those areas that they sought the support for in their job advancement and work advancement for their careers. So moving forward with the next slide, please. So the New York Peer Advancement, we are a very small but powerful team that consists of myself, Yvette, Patricia, Pate, the director. We have KC Carpenter, who is with us today, pronouns they and them. And as I mentioned, we have Joel McDonald, who is our web manager. I would like to also make it known that we have free membership that we offer for the New York Peer Specialists. the family peer advocates credentialed, as well as youth peer advocates credentialed. And you all are able to click this link that is here, and it's also in the chat if I'm not mistaken, and you can get your free membership. We have a lot of individuals who have signed up, and we have really enhanced the quality of the link that you would click in order to get your free membership, so that there's not a two-part process. Joel was able to streamline that. So when you click on this link, it'll take you straight to where you can access your free membership. And then you'll be able to receive the information. You'll get announcements about what we have to offer. You'll be kept up to date. I would like to encourage anyone that is present here that is interested in any aspect of our deliverables, be it the mentorship project, which we will be recruiting for within the next couple of weeks, as well as if you would like to be mentored, or if you want to be a part of our advisory board, please don't hesitate to make sure that you sign up for your free membership so that you can gain access to all of the things that you are eligible for under NYPAN, the NYPAN project. We are very, very enthusiastic about moving forward with our goals and objectives. We thank everyone who has received us when we've come out and done outreach, when we have presentations and things of that nature. I see a lot of familiar names and faces here since I've joined today, and I'm really, really excited as we continue to push forth the vision of moving forward and advancing peer specialists and advocates throughout the state of New York. And I will leave a little time for questions if there is any, but thank you very much.
Actually, what I was going to say, Yvette, and thank you. Amazing
Sure.
initiative. We need to move on to the keynote, but
Okay.
everybody, Casey
Perfect
and Yvette
timing.
will be here, so ask any questions in the chat. They should be able to respond to your questions in the chat. And I am just so excited about this initiative and that we can partner together as we do. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And so without further ado, I would like to begin preparation for sharing. Oh, hang on a second. Here we go. Did it again. Okay. For sharing an introduction to a very dear friend of mine, but let me give the housekeeping details first. So I just want to thank you all for joining our PeerTAC sponsored keynote for this afternoon. The keynote is the 5 critical functions of supervision and the competencies of effective supervisors of peer support workers, presented by my dear friend Dr. Jonathan Edwards. I'm Rita Cronice, and I am the co-director for PeerTAC. Many of you joined earlier, so you've heard this all before. But for those of you who just joined for the keynote, just need to give you a few housekeeping details. Your microphones will be muted and your cameras will be off to eliminate any background noise and distraction. We encourage you to use the chat box to introduce yourself, to ask questions, and to ask especially for Yvette and Casey any questions you have of the NYPAN initiative. Please feel free to use the chat to ask them questions as we make the transition to the keynote. This session is being recorded, and the presentation slides and any handouts will be on our PeerTAC website within 30 days. If you lose internet connection or accidentally leave the room, choose the link next to the title in your program, which we're assuming you all have your program by now, to rejoin the session. If you're seeking continuing education credit for this session, you cannot use a phone link. So you won't be eligible for continuing education if you're dialing in by phone. You have to sign in and have an internet connection. More information about continuing education is at the back of the program, but you will get a program evaluation from the Alliance for Rights and Recovery that you'll need to fill out within 48 hours. So if you're looking for continuing education, watch for that, because you'll need to complete that in order to get to continuing education. However, we encourage everybody to fill it out, because we could really use any kind of feedback that you have about this session for our planning for, we hope this is just the first of, we hope, many sessions. So with that, I have asked for the keynotes for these particular sessions to be introduced by somebody who knows them very well, a friend, somebody who has worked closely with them, because they'll have a little bit more information to share. And so with that, I would like to hand this over to Taina Lang, who is the CEO of Baltic Street Wellness Solutions. Taina, take it away.
Hi, Rita. My video isn't showing. Forgive me, guys. So, hi, everyone. My name is Taina Lang. I have the proud privilege and honor to be presenting my dear friend, Dr. Jonathan P. Edwards, who is a social scientist, public health professional, licensed clinical social worker, certified peer specialist, certified personal medicine coach, and faculty at Columbia University School of Social Work. He led the largest peer support workforce within New York City hospital system and significantly contributed to the development of the peer support workforce. Dr. Edwards has published research on job satisfaction and supervision practices, contributed to the development of national practice guidelines for peer support specialists and supervisors, presented on research and practiced nationally and internationally, served on a technical expert panels to develop national model standards for peer support certification, as well as national recovery research agenda. He has received several awards and has co-authored numerous peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, and co-edited the recently published What It Takes: Wisdom from the Peer Support Specialists and Supervisors. Dr. Edwards received his master's in philosophy and doctor of philosophy in social welfare from CUNY Graduate Center, his master's of social work from the Silverman School of Social Work at Hunter, and his bachelor's in industrial organizational psychology from City College of the City University of New York. Dr. Edwards is passionate about the topics of supervision and peer support workforce development and looks forward to sharing his gleaning tips and lessons learned from his professional journey. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Edwards.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Can someone give me a thumbs up just to show that I'm audible? I only need one. All right. Thank you, Matthew. Matthew, you are always on point. So I just want to check in on one housekeeping piece, and I just want to see if I am co-hosted, because I'm going to actually share my own slides so that I can move through the presentation and sort of control my little bit of animation. It looks like I'm not able to share yet, so I will just wait on the queue, and then I will get started.
Do you have
Jonathan,
the option to share your screen, Jonathan?
Great. All right. Thank you, Rita. Okay, as the holiday song goes, do you see what I see? I hope that you're seeing PeerTAC Supervision Summit, What It Takes: Supervising Peer Support Specialists and Advocates. So good afternoon again. I just want to say I'm really truly honored and humbled by the invitation to share space with so many of you at the inaugural PeerTAC Supervision Summit, What It Takes: Supervising Peer Specialists and Advocates. I want to acknowledge PeerTAC, a collaboration of New York University McSilver Institute for Poverty and Research, and Rutgers University Academy of Peer Services for their stellar and steadfast leadership organizing this summit, strengthening interconnectedness between vital facets of the peer support workforce. Welcome to the individuals and organizations represented here today, demonstrating both a commitment to improve access to peer support across the lifespan and an investment to obtain and exchange knowledge about supervision of a flourishing workforce. I want to say thank you to my esteemed friend and colleague, Taina Lang, the Chief Executive Officer of the newly minted Baltic Street Wellness Solutions. Thank you for the kind introduction, Taina. I really appreciate it. I often talk about not recognizing the person described in my own bio introduction, and that's so much of the reason why I'm able to be here today. Recovery and success are not devoid of complexities and paradoxes. And I contend that it's these textured dimensions that have crafted and continue to sustain the foundation upon which the work we are talking about today is fashioned. So I think I'm ready to go to my first slide. So here I am. And again, this keynote is the 5 critical functions of supervision and the competencies of effective supervisors of peer support workers. So I just want to start out with a little mantra that I came up with. And this is a recent picture. I'm in my casual t-shirt. I'm hanging out in one of my favorite places in New York City. I'm not going to tell you where it is because I don't want everyone going there. But I'm holding a candle that I got at a retreat last summer. And the candle actually has a battery operated tea light in it. Which I used to turn my nose up at, but I realized that it's really a safe way to go. And I'm in this library, in this venue, and I think this was a selfie. And I really like this picture because I felt like the other one looked a little bit austere. So I just wanted to share with you all that I believe that at any point in time, it's entirely possible to shine a light on your path ahead. I try not to put things up that I don't believe or that just sound good, and maybe people will believe that I believe it, but I truly believe this because I've been in so many different places where it did take that little glimmer of light to not only shine my path ahead, but to also give me that mustard seed of hope that so many of us talk about. So my 5 critical functions of supervision keynote, competencies of effective supervisors and peer support workers, it draws on many years of experience and a number of roles that you just heard about in the introduction. I look forward to strategically straddling the line that sometimes joins and other times separates the personal and professional aspects of my journey. The words I will share with you today vacillate between the personal and the professional, and even converge at certain points, as I contend that the personal experience influences the lens of supervisors, and just this supervision influences organizational culture. These are 2 of the 8 points that I will address this afternoon, but I first want to set my intention to ground myself and light my path ahead. As you can see in the call out, I am very fond of mantras. So at this time, I just want to pause a little bit, and I'd like to invite each of you to set your intention. I also want to say that I'm sorry that I'm not able to see your faces, although I would probably be very, very distracted because I would be looking for those whom I know in the gallery. And because this is in a webinar format, I just have to have faith and speak into the ether and trust that I haven't put anyone to sleep. So I just want to invite each of you to set your intention. Take a few moments to connect with a specific reason for attending this particular presentation. What is it that you seek? Whether it's an actionable idea, an unanswered question, or something else, I invite you to type it into the chat. I want to take a few moments to acknowledge some of the responses as they come in. So I'm actually going to go to the chat, and hopefully I'm not asking too much for 1:15 or 1:30 in the afternoon after some of you have been here since 9 a.m. Knowledge on how to better support family peer advocates. Excellent, because this is across the lifespan. Equity and service, access to all. Ooh, growth personally and professionally. Knowledge, experience, and enlightenment. Thank you. These are great. If I start reading any of the lengthy ones, the screen will jump and I'll cut off. So I'll just say to learn more. That's totally cool. That's why I show up at a lot of places. Offer a safe environment for support and education. Phenomenal. Integration of peer services to the team. Inspiration, rules and guidelines. These are really great. These are great intentions. Best way to support my peers. Educational, clear expectations. Learn and work more effectively. Oh, these are wonderful. Thank you so much for responding to this prompt. I want to say that in this webinar format, and particularly in a virtual environment, interaction is even all the more important. And as I said, I'm not able to see your faces, but I appreciate your spirit and your words and your willingness to engage. There are sections of this keynote that are very didactic. I tried to stay away from that academic researchy tone, but some of the work that is connected with this particular model of supervision does in fact involve our explanation through some recent participatory action research with which we were published. Well, actually, we had an article accepted in the American Journal of Psychiatric Rehabilitation. Volume 25, it's been accepted. It has not been released yet. But I just want to take the time to call out Dr. Amy Spagnolo, Ms. Rita Cronice, Dr. Joanne Forbes, Ms. Gita Enders, and Dr. Carlos Pratt, Professor Emeritus of Rutgers University, for collaborating with me on this recent research that we were published on and that I'll be talking about a little bit today. So thank you very much for those sentiments that you're putting in the chat. I'm fond of saving the chat and always looking through it. I'm glad your names are connected with it. So when I see you, I may be able to remind you of what you said. So thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is recognize and acknowledge ourselves as a diverse workforce. We're representing adult, family, youth, justice involved, and older adult service milieus, as well as roles such as advocate, program director, supervisor, chief executive officer. Let's take a few moments to find out who's in the room. So I know that we're going to launch a poll, and let me just put it out there that there are going to be 2 polls. So what I'm going to ask is that everyone who is in the room respond to these first 3 questions. We're going to have 3 more questions, but those next 3 questions, I'm asking people only who identify as a supervisor in question 3. So that's a peer supervisor or a non-peer supervisor to answer questions 4, 5, and 6. And I'm going to count and add these up at the end. So I'm going to come looking for you if you don't follow instructions. Just kidding. Okay, so can we launch the first poll? As it says, stay tuned. In a few minutes, you will see a live poll. And we're looking to really find out who's in the room. So we're going to give it a moment, launch the poll, and you'll be able to answer all 3 of those questions. What your primary role is, who you work primarily with, and what you identify with. So
I may have to stand by longer than I thought, so hold on a sec.
well, that's okay, because you told me you were bringing music, right? So yeah, it's okay. We're in a virtual environment, stuff happens, and just gives me a chance to catch my breath and just feel some gratitude about being here on such an important, highly visible and pivotal project in New York State. And just to say hello again to those who might have joined since we've begun. And what's great is that people are putting things in the chat anyway, so we're gonna know who you are. But I think Eileen's about to work her magic and launch a poll.
Well, I'm glad you have such faith in me, because Zoom is not being my friend today, and I had it ready to go and it's no longer showing up. So I mean, if you
how
have a little bit.
How about I come to Albany and we sit there and we count through the chat and do those little tick marks together.
Yeah,
and
that would be
beautiful. So that's our alternative. So we'll just give another moment, and thank you for putting this in, because we're actually excuse me, knowing my colleague Rita, she'll be up till 3 in the morning counting how many of each role was here. And that's an affectionate call out to Rita. I like to joke around with my colleague. All right, thank you for doing this. It's always great to have alternatives, right? As they say, it's 10% what happens, 90% how we respond. And so I'm really grateful that we have different mechanisms to weigh in.
Here we go.
Yeah.
I got it.
Woohoo! All right. So if you take the poll, it doesn't mean you're voting twice. You're not cheating. So even if you typed it in the chat already, please let us know who you are. This is so wonderful. Eileen, thank you for not giving up and for bringing up the poll. But I'm still coming to Albany to count with you.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Oh, thank you so much. Look at all these people. Wow. When I'm seeing the numbers increase so quickly, it just reminds me of those few times I was in Atlantic City, and quarters were coming out and just kept jumping and jumping and jumping. And wow, this is great. So I'm going to give it another minute. Thank you so much. So our running counts look like we have primarily supervisors, or let's just say we have a lot of program managers, and we know program managers do a lot of things. So you might even be doing a little supervision. But in terms of these discrete categories, we have supervisors sort of running the lead, which sort of makes sense given the nature of this keynote topic. We have a non-peer support worker. That's interesting because that could actually be many of these categories. So we'll figure that one out later.
Do you want me to end the poll, Jonathan, so that it gives you the report?
No, that's okay, because well, you can actually end it. Okay, great.
Here you go.
All right, so we're still in the same pattern. Supervisors leading. We have a lot of program managers. We certainly have some folks who are running these organizations or making sure that they're run well. Most of us are working in adult services. We have a small number representing older adults, family and youth. Welcome, really glad to see that you're represented here. Your work is so important and part of the continuum and the lifespan of the work we're talking about, just as impacted. Shout out to you. And then our third question, peer supervisors, those who have lived experience as well as their supervisory title. You seem to be greater represented in number than the non-peer supervisors, but we have a lot of non-peer supervisors, and we're happy that you're here because we're really all trying to get on the same page and knowledge share and really understand why these forums are important. So thank you for the work that you do, and we're hoping to provide more tools and insight into the wonderful work of peer support. And non-peer, who is not a supervisor. So thank you for voting there. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the next slide, and anyone who voted in question 3 that they were a peer supervisor or a non-peer supervisor, we're going to ask now that you answer questions 4, 5, and 6. And these questions, these next questions that we're going to see on this slide are a little bit of a prelude to a workshop that we're going to be doing this afternoon, almost immediately following this keynote, called Know Nothing None, Answers to 3 Critical Questions about Peer Support Supervision. So I am stopping the sharing of this poll. All righty. So here we go. So here we go. Thank you, Eileen. So please answer these only if you answered that you were a non-peer supervisor or a peer supervisor in question 3. Because these are sort of part and parcel of our Know Nothing None exploration. We're really trying to find out how you became what you became, how you ended up in the supervisory role. When you became a supervisor, were any responsibilities removed? And did you receive specialized training to become a supervisor? Okay. So we're going to give it another 30 seconds, and then Eileen will stop the poll. Or maybe a little bit more than 30 because we're moving closer to the denominator, 281. We've got 61% participating. I see some hands raised. I don't know if that's because you're trying to vote or if you're trying to get my attention or tell me that you can't see me in the screen, but I'm sure that my colleagues will let me know if any of those questions need to be responded to in real time. So we'll stop the poll at this point. And interestingly, more than half of you volunteered to be a supervisor, And we'd really be interested to know what that sounded like, but we're not going to do that here, but maybe later and know nothing, want none. But a good number of you did not volunteer, which meant that you either received an honorable promotion or you were voluntold. When you became a supervisor, were any responsibilities removed? So 24% of you said yes, 76% said no. And did you receive specialized training to become a supervisor? 45% of you said yes, and I would probably give $1 to every one of you to tell me what that training was. That's good information for us to know. And more than half of you said you did not receive specialized training. So these are very telling, and this information is actually, we're not collecting it to kill time. We're actually collecting it because we are on a research trajectory, really trying to gather information from the people, for the people, and make sure that our claims are data informed. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop the sharing here. I'm going to share the results. I'm going to close this out, and we're going to move on. So thank you again. Thank you, Eileen. Okay, so the learning objectives, getting down to the business at hand, is that I'm really confident that following the keynote presentation, you will be able to, 1, identify the 5 critical functions of supervision, 2, describe a supervision function, competency, and task, and 3, contribute to the development of a supervision practice tool if you choose. And even though it's voluntary, it's still a learning objective and it still counts and you'll still get CEUs. So we just want people to feel that they don't have to do anything, but we're inviting you to give input into the supervision practice tool that is already underway. So I mentioned earlier that my talk is going to attempt to organize the content into 8 key points. I love lists, I love taxonomies, I love frameworks, and different ways of organizing information. And so I'm just going to start out by saying that the first point is that living experience informs the lens of supervision, and I'll talk about that in terms of my own experience. Key point number 2 is that supervision informs organizational culture. And I will say that supervisors are extremely pivotal in the organization, and they actually harness a lot of power that usually is not explained to them, or they're not empowered to really utilize that power in the best possible way. And I'm sharing that from my own experience, from observation, and from talking to various people in supervisory roles. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The third point is that core values of peer support are foundational to the inclusion of peer support workers. Key point number 4 is what my supervisor helped me to see. So a little sentimentality here. And key point number 5, developing the 5 critical functions of supervision, which is really the centerpiece of our work and this presentation. Key point number 6, how we explore the 5 functions using participatory action research. Key point 7 is creating a supervisor competencies and tasks tool. And key point number 8 is really a synthesis and takeaways from what I spoke about today. So key point number 1, living experience informs the lens of supervision. Okay, so I want to talk about my deep belief that lived experience informs the lens of supervision or supervisors. Rather than explicate a theoretical example, I will speak directly from my own experience. Life's ups and downs and ebbs and flows that were instrumental in developing empathy and eventually learning to value and include living experience lessons into the art and science of relating with others, both as a supervisor and a supervisee. My own experiences, perhaps previously labeled as failure and limitation, could now be utilized as points of reference along which I could identify with people to whom I provided supervision. I also contend that living experience is a complex continuum and often riddled with paradoxes. And I like to show this because this kind of speaks to what I'm trying to convey now. So, for example, what I once thought was the lowest point of my life has now become a verse of inspiration, at the very minimum for myself. I show these 2 images because although they present an idealistic picture of a happy child and a successful adult, between this bookended story stuff happened. I had another expletive, but I decided this is PeerTAC and I want to keep it clean. I won't spend a lot of time talking about this stuff, but it is important for me to acknowledge the stuff. Depression, excessive substance use, hopelessness, discouragement, self-doubt, diagnoses, internal and external stigma, racism, homophobia. Should I keep going, folks? I can't see your faces, so I'll assume that you're saying no, please move on. So in my humble opinion, anyone enduring and meaning making of these experiences has earned some of the stripes required to be a good supervisor. Okay, and I like this quote here that I put, and this was really a very vivid image that I tend to remember, and it gives me both gratitude and humility, is that getting up, making the bed, and washing the dishes were 3 worthy accomplishments. I also gave myself permission to pursue long-sought dreams of returning to school, to complete my bachelor's degree at almost 40, and eventually my master in social work, and then my doctorate some years later, and to express kindness even if I didn't feel great about the world or myself. And, you know, sometimes that's how I get by. I may not be feeling too well, but I can still give myself permission to be kind. And I think that sort of epitomizes part of the supervisory role, is that as supervisors, we're not so much responsible for people, but we're responsible for making sure that the work gets done. And we have a really pivotal role in terms of how a person feels in their job and how supported they feel. And we do this work despite ourselves. So there were times when I came to work and I might have witnessed one of my supervisees really having a hard time, but being very committed to showing up for others, and I drew strength from them. And I would tell them that from time to time. So I just really wanted to share this piece because it's important that when we look at images that we understand that a great many other facts underlie those images. So moving on, the second point is that supervisors the second point that I will convey is that supervision informs organizational culture. So supervisors, whether or not they realize it, and I started to say this earlier, are pivotal players in the workforce arena, but are rarely, if ever, acknowledged for reconciling management's expectations with employees' aspirations, capabilities, capacity, and training. There is an inherent tension in being a supervisor. In fact, my colleagues, Joanne, Rita, and Gita, are exploring pathways by which supervisors have historically been uploaded into these positions. And once again, please attend our workshop later this afternoon, Know Nothing None, to delve deeper into this topic. There are many ways in which deployment and assignment of supervisors show up in the fabric of organization. We have heard numerous accounts, as well as observed, that supervision is not consistent, structured, or supportive, or does not happen at all. We have learned from Dr. Forbes' seminal research on experiences of peer support workers supervised by non-peer supervisors that peer support workers look to be supervised by someone with whom they can identify along the lines of peerness, establish a shared language, and find agreement on values that underpin peer support practice. There are many unintended consequences of random and perfunctory assignment of employees into supervisor roles. I reiterate that this will be covered in Know Nothing None, almost immediately following this keynote. So given that supervision informs organizational culture, it behooves us to consider ways that organizations can optimally support supervisors of peer support workers. And here are some examples about how this work has been done on a super macro level. So in 2014, SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, convened Pillars of Peer Support, a forum from which Pillars of Peer Support specialist supervision was developed and published 1 year later. The 5 pillars state that peer specialist supervisors should 1, be trained in quality supervisory skills, 2, understand and support the role of the peer specialist, 3, understand and promote recovery in their supervisory roles, 4, advocate for the peer specialist and peer specialist services across the organization and in the community, and I'm going to add, and across the lifespan. And 5, promote both the professional and personal growth of the peer specialist within established human service standards. So almost a decade later, and many of you know that SAMHSA collaborated with federal, state, tribal, and local partners to develop the national model standards for peer support certification, inclusive of mental health, substance use, and family and youth certifications. Creation of these standards was part of an overarching strategy to address our national mental health crisis as outlined in the 2022 Presidential Unity Agenda. To strengthen system capacity, connect more Americans to care, and create a continuum of support to address mental health holistically and equitably, President Biden proposed the development and implementation of a national certification program for mental health peer specialists. There are 11 model standards, among which supervision is included and identified as a vital component to the recertification process and an important operating standard for the peer workforce. SAMHSA's National Model Standard on Supervision recommends that 1, state certification entities incorporate core elements outlined in the 5 pillars of peer support supervision into certification requirements. 2, in addition to any supervisor-specific training requirements, state certification entities require prospective certified peer support supervisors to have direct experience as a certified peer worker. And 3, prospective certified peer supervisors have experience as a certified peer worker and a deep knowledge of the skills needed to work as a certified peer worker. And 4, state certification entities incorporate specific requirements on lived experience for prospective certified peer support supervisors. Now, I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you. This is being recorded, so very much like me, you can go back and you can put it on slow, or you can put it on low, or you can just keep playing it or not play it, but the information is available. The presentation, I say that if you can remember, I don't know, the learning objectives, you're doing really, really well, because this is a lot of information. And we move on to my third point. My third point is that core values of peer support, of which there are 12, are vital to the inclusion of peer support workers in the workplace. These core values were codified in 2013 in the National Practice Guidelines for Peer Supporters and subsequently operationalized for supervisors in 2019 under National Practice Guidelines for Peer Support Specialists and Supervisors, and this is denoted as NPGS. Core values of peer support are foundational to inclusion of peer support workers. I'll say that again. Core values of peer support are foundational to inclusion of peer support workers. And I say that when I first went into my role as a supervisor and a peer, I didn't know anything about core values of peer support. And I'm being transparent to foster a sense of courage that it's good to know what we don't know, okay? Because then we can learn it. And I would be remiss not to talk briefly about the core value underlying guideline number 6. And, I'm connecting with Rita now because she does this very well. And I looked through my emails to find her notes. So what I'm about to read, I excerpted from Rita's dossier. All right, so guideline number 6, that peer supporters facilitate change. This was used with permission from the World Health Organization Quality Rights Toolkit, which was under revision at the time that the National Practice Guidelines were being developed. The World Health Organization later included the full set of national practice guidelines in their global guidance documents for peer support workers. Guideline number 6, in particular, speaks to the need to advocate for people, to respect and protect basic human rights, and to assist people in learning to advocate for themselves. Apropos of our focus today, when the National Practice Guidelines were revised to include guidance for supervisors, it was important to capture the spirit of advocacy and to coach peer support workers in ways to help those supported to learn to advocate for themselves. In previous workshops, we included a role play called From Motto to Demo, where participants demonstrate moving from the motto or bullet points of the National Practice Guidelines to what they actually look like in practice. And so to further illustrate how a specific core value translates to practice for the peer support specialists and for supervisors supporting this work, I will use guideline number 2. And guideline number 2 is that peer support workers share hope, and the practice value is hope, or the practice behavior is share hope. So I'm going to go to my next slide. And here what we see is in the left-hand column, the practice value is to share hope. This is guideline number 2. And in the right column, the supervisor's role is too. And I used to have ellipses there. I don't know what happened to them. But basically, what the peer support worker does in practice is tell strategic stories of personal recovery in relation to current struggles faced by those being supported. And peer supporters can model recovery behaviors at work and act as ambassadors of recovery in all aspects of their work. And needless to say, these core values and practice behaviors do warrant more fleshing out, but this is a really great place to start. And third, peer supporters help others reframe life's challenges as opportunities for personal growth. And I think I touched on that a little bit at the beginning of my comments today. So the supervisor role is to demonstrate confidence in the peer specialist's ability to share a hopeful message, right? So I often talk about unconditional positive regard, the assumption that someone can succeed and to do something effectively. Okay, and that everyone has strengths, unconditional positive regard. So as a supervisor, it's not to say that I don't coach and I don't seek to collaborate and I don't give feedback, but I do demonstrate confidence in the peer specialist's ability to share a hopeful message. Also, as a supervisor, I can provide a way to further develop the skills for disclosing personal experience with the goals of inspiring hope, developing trust and rapport, and fostering strengths. And this can sometimes be done with lots of different examples. It doesn't have to be about our mental health or our mental wellness or our efforts to change our dietary habits. The good thing about modeling is that we can use a lot of metaphors. And even as a supervisor who doesn't identify as a peer, there are many, many examples that you can effectively use to help the peer support worker to build these skills. And lastly, modeling self-care, appropriate boundaries, and an authentic belief in recovery through language, attitude, and actions. And so that goes to say that whether you're a peer supervisor or a non-peer supervisor, it's vital, almost necessary, to understand what the core values are and to understand what recovery philosophy is and some of the language, attitudes, and actions associated with recovery. So I'm going to move to what my supervisor helped me to see. And this is an excerpt from what I'm about to share. And it basically says that I began to think more critically about how my role as a supervisor, combined with my own lived experience, both informs and potentially limits my judgment when conducting supervision. So I'm moving into this self-reflection piece, this self-assessment piece around the importance of the parallel process of supervision involving both guidance to others as well as self-assessment. So moving to this point, this is really an homage to a former supervisor who affirmed and encouraged me to see beyond the frustrations of bureaucracy and tedium to a greater perspective about the importance and multifaceted nature of supervision. She suggested that I take stock of the myriad functions, tasks, and learning opportunities embedded in my multiple roles as the consumer affairs coordinator, a project manager, a supervisor of peer advocates, and someone who had just completed a master's in social work while also working full-time. So I began to think more critically about how these multiple professional roles combined with my lived experience both informed and potentially limited my judgment as a supervisor. Concerned that I would be either too stringent or too lenient when responding to supervisees, I needed to be deeply reflective about fairness and accountability and began to unpack layers of the work which led to the creation of a matrix. This tool helped me navigate the plethora of issues and situations raised in supervision situations while managing my own wellness and recovery. And so I'm going to begin to talk about the 5 functions of supervision and how they came about. And this is just a diagram to show you what they are. And they are administrate, support, educate, advocate, and evaluate. So the participatory action research approach that I'm going to talk about briefly really takes this to a whole other level, where we begin to look at trying to gain some agreement from people doing the work as to what they really feel are tasks and competencies related to the 5 critical functions of supervision. what we're going to do now is just talk a little bit about what these 5 functions mean. And you can see that there are 3 examples that are associated with each of the functions. And it doesn't mean that there aren't more, but these are 3 that we've been using in many of our presentations. And so I always contend that administrative supervision begins long before the person is formally onboarded, because this involves a whole process of making sure that a job description is accurate, that it's in place, and that the rest of the team or organization understands what that role actually does. And this is pre-work that precedes a person actually walking into the building, and it's part of the administrative domain or administrative functions. And then that moves into making sure that people meet the qualifications. And once the person is onboarded, there's a whole orientation process to the organizational structure and the ongoing nature and the ongoing work of helping staff to understand practices, policies, and procedures. And that's extremely broad, because sometimes that includes the annual mandatory test that people have to take when they work in healthcare settings. And that might also fall under evaluate, because it's a way of evaluating our knowledge about stuff, but it's usually launched from an administrative point of view. The supportive domain really has to do with building rapport and providing constructive feedback, inspiring excellence and promoting wellness and self-care, utilizing a strengths-based and trauma-informed approach to help staff problem solve. For the sake of time, I'll read one from the remaining 3. So educate, explaining the big picture and providing context and value of specific roles in supporting the mission of that person's work. And to advocate, which is one of the functions that was added to the previous SAMHSA model of supervision. Their 3-function model of supervision, which was to administrate, support, and educate. And this model expands on that by adding advocate and evaluate. So in advocacy, we found that this particular function speaks to a lot of the pieces that we're sort of walking around the room in the form of elephants. It's like, well, how do we talk to people about peer support work? And, how do we talk to people about reasonable accommodations when appropriate? And how do we foster good morale without being infantilizing or condescending or making assumptions or asking people if they took their medicines, so advocate is really, really important, because I think that it fills a gap that existed that we really didn't talk about, and our scenarios really play that out. And to evaluate, basically conducting performance evaluations should be the end result of the evaluation, but usually that constitutes what people see as evaluation, that we're going to rate you, we're going to judge you, we're going to grade you. But evaluation is so much more than that, because it's really helping people to manage the expectations with respect to their job performance, addressing areas needing improvement. I keep promising to change this term progressive discipline to maybe appreciative feedback and ongoing support or something like that. But we do use the term progressive discipline, which sounds very punitive, but we can sort of reframe that as an opportunity to work more closely with a person needing to build skills or to address and remediate a particular area. So these are the 5 critical functions of supervision. And this here is, I think what I'm going to do is abandon my notes and just try to speak to this, as they say, free form. Because if I start reading the notes, it's going to sound like a research report, and we don't want that. So basically, Dr. Spagnolo and myself, about 2.5 years ago, we're talking about the 5-function model of supervision, and Dr. Spagnolo, or Amy, more affectionately known as, suggested that maybe we create some focus groups and talk to people about what their views were about supervision, really setting it up in this framework of the 5 critical functions. And so that all began by facilitating and analyzing what we call Delphi focus groups. And so I believe that we met with overall about 26 supervisors from across New York State. We asked the same questions. They were 90-minute focus groups. We collected their demographic information, so we ensured diversification or diversity among the participants in these groups, and they worked in different service settings. And I think we did about 4 groups. And so that was our first process of the research. So what we then did was incorporate the feedback from the 26 peer support supervisors who were in these initial Delphi groups. And we also had spoken with 24 peer support specialists. We took their feedback as well from the initial questions about these 5 functions. After that, what we did after lots and lots of coding and constant comparison, qualitative research, data analysis methodologies, what we did was we developed the 71 competency statements. And again, that was Rita, Joanne, myself, Amy, and Gita. And so we did a lot of work in terms of coding and looking at themes, eliminating overlap. I'm going to talk briefly about Joanne going into the literature and doing a confirmatory literature review to make sure that everything that was coming up from the focus group data was also represented in the literature. One of the discoveries was that most of the literature that spoke about supervision was gray literature, which we mean is non-peer reviewed literature, but perhaps manuals, technical reports, and the like. And here we are with her conducted a literature review, and we should say confirmatory there. From all of that, what we did was we developed a survey based on these 71 competencies, and we launched the survey. And it's a pilot survey because this is exploratory research. And we did an analysis where, and I'm actually going to read some of this because I think it's important to share some of the methodology by which we arrived at where we're currently at. So basically, what we did was we disseminated the pilot survey of 71 competency statements that span the 5 functions of supervision. The importance, criticality, and frequency of these competency statements were rated by survey respondents. And so those were the measures that we were looking at were importance, frequency, and criticality. So importance was evaluated by how important is the task to successfully perform the job. Frequency was evaluated by how often does a supervisor or peer support workers perform the task. And criticality was evaluated by what is the risk for an adverse consequence if the supervisor or peer support workers does not perform the task. So then we moved into a whole psychometric analysis, and that's where Dr. Carlos Pratt was really instrumental in helping us to get this paper published. So the findings are that the factors on which participants rated each competency for importance, criticality, and frequency, they were combined using a formula. Exciting formula, I'm not going to read it. And we arrived at weights for each competency. This methodology is an accepted and widely used strategy for rating clinical actions and procedures. So the computed weights for the competencies within each of the 5 supervisory functions within standardized into Z-scores to allow for comparisons. And we'll say that standardization recalculates each of the weights, which were the results of the formula, into its difference from the average in terms of the standard deviation. In short, it makes all of the weights comparable to each other. And I'll just say now that what we did was we arbitrarily used a Z-score of 1 or greater to identify the competencies with the highest weights. A Z-score of 1 or greater suggests that an item was weighted highly by 68% or more of the participants. And those of you who are into statistics know that this is 1 standard deviation above the mean, which means that people rated these competencies higher than average. So the competencies identified by this procedure were actually supported by from between 86% and 98%, which actually moves into 2 to 3 standard deviations above the mean. These are the competencies that you'll see listed in the handout that will be shown on the next slide. But just to finish out our exploration of these 5 functions, at the last stage is that we prepared and we submitted a manuscript. And Gita, we're going to need you to add another box on here to say that the manuscript was accepted for publication. So here is just a slide showing what the variables are, what the symbols are, what the lowest range to the highest range means in terms of representation of meaning. And here's the formula at the bottom. I just wanted to keep this here for posterity, but we really don't need to talk about it anymore. So here is the opportunity, and this is key point number 7. Here's the opportunity to really talk to you all about the supervisor competencies and task tool that we've begun working on already. And you can see in the left-hand column that you see the functions: administrative, support, educate, advocate, and evaluate. The competency statements, of which there were 71, we just finished explaining that of those 71, 11 of them actually met the threshold of being at least 1 standard deviation or greater above the mean. So those are the competencies that you see listed in the second column. The task, in practice, supervisors can. And so we wanted to set this up in a way that if you're a supervisor and you're talking about supportive supervision and you're like, oh, I really want to discuss the importance of confidentiality, you can look in this right-hand column. Not that you're going to be doing this, but it's a really great tool. It's a self-assessment tool. And also, we believe that peer support specialists will be able to use the same tool to evaluate their experience in supervision. So we begin to build a little bit of agreement in terms of tools and ways of ensuring that supervision is sound. And that example could be that in confidentiality, the supervisor explains benefits and risks associated with confidentiality on both individual and organizational levels, like risk management or just a loss of trust by violating someone's confidentiality. Building trust through mutuality and transparency could be sharing examples of our own experience, including challenges and lessons learned. Like I said before, it doesn't have to be about drugs or mental health, but it could be, and it could be about many other things. And modeling appropriate disclosure of experience for the benefit of the recipient or the person who's being supported. So this particular tool is underway. We had a big draft mark across it because we don't want you to take screenshots of it and use it because it's still in pre-pilot phase. But there's going to be opportunities. We already have 10 people from a previous conversation who would like to give input to this tool. So we're going to be holding some focus groups, and that information will probably be on the virtual community of practice, how you can get involved in providing input to this tool. And that's keeping with the theme of participatory action research, is that even as researchers, we're not doing a top-down design of tools and training materials. We're really trying to involve, as I say, from the people, of the people, with the people, for the people. So this is our tool. And I'm going to move on to the next slide to synthesis and takeaways from hopefully what I was able to convey with you this afternoon. So the first one is that supervision is pivotal in organizational culture. And I talked a lot about that earlier in terms of the power that the supervisor harnesses, but often is unaware of it because they're often not supported and empowered by their own organizations. I do want to say that referencing the 5 critical functions of supervision, I began to talk about it earlier, that the advocative function suggests that a competent supervisor, quote, strengthens the practice of peer support by promoting its value, both in supervision and throughout the organization. That takes a really empowered individual to do that. And this requires that one is not just a great supervisor, but they are knowledgeable of peer support values in practice. It also requires that the supervisor be a champion of culture change and willing to disrupt oppressive systems that often impede change. And lastly, the supervisor needs to be both teacher and teachable. The second point of synthesis is that supervision functions at the micro, meso, and macro levels, okay? And basically, supervision ranges from being in the room with that 1 or 2 or 3 individuals, if it's group supervision, to then really helping the individual to optimally support those they're working with, which would be at a meso level. And then the macro levels is how the supervisor and the supervision practices begin to move into and influence the organizational culture. Supervision is both art and science, organic yet methodical, okay? And art and science is that. The science is, you know, that tool that we have, but how you speak to that tool is the art, right? And organic meaning you want to be a relatable human being, but it's important to hold structure and to be methodical and to be organized and to have supervision happen regularly and hopefully at the same time. That's part of the methodology of it. Supervision entails a parallel process for providing guidance to others and self-assessment. Rita and I have talked a lot over the years about parallel process, how important it is to do the self-reflection while we're also doing the coaching and the provision of guidance to others. Supervision can be organized by functions, tasks, and competencies, as we just saw on our supervision tasks and competencies tool under construction. And at the end of the day, good supervision is good supervision. And this is not to negate the nuances that are involved in working with individuals who are returning to the workplace after a hiatus. It could be a parent, I used to say mother, but it's a parent who may have been utilizing their time to raise their family and have been out of the organized workforce for a long time. They're coming back. Technologies have changed. A person who might have had a physical injury and has been out of the workforce for a long time. Those like myself who might have had emotional setbacks and was out of the workforce, or at least the traditional bona fide, above board, white collar workplace for a long time, and coming back in, and the supervisor being able to identify strengths, to not pathologize, to have some understanding of what the challenges may have been, but really help the supervisee to move those challenges into skills that would help others that they have the privilege of supporting. And so these are some of the synthesis and takeaway points that I wanted to leave you with. I also have an opportunity to talk about a relatively new resource. I think it's been out for about a year. I think that this launched on Valentine's Day of 2023. This is What It Takes: Wisdom from Peer Support Specialists and Supervisors. Proud to say that the book is co-edited by Rita, myself, Gita, and Joanne Forbes. So there are 4 co-editors, and we constitute a national workforce and supervision work group, which is an extension of the National Association of Peer Supporters, of which Yvette Pate spoke about very nicely before this keynote. There are more than 40 contributions from 5 years of national conference proceedings, and this is a fundraiser. So we're so proud that this book is out. And as they say, if you do the thing that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And so the payment that we get from this is pride and feedback and the knowledge that we're making a difference, or we're hopefully making a difference in this area of peer support and supervision. But all proceeds from this book go to the National Association of Peer Supporters. And as of the 17th annual conference, which was in October, 800 copies had sold, raising $6,720. So this is available on Amazon. You can see the citation there. It's a really great book. It makes a great gift. It makes a good raffle prize for conferences when you want to keep people in the room and say that you had really great attendance. Tell them you got a raffle at the end and raffle off the book, which I'm going to be doing at the National Council next month. So please take stock of this resource, because this is truly of the people, for the people. We curated and we consulted and we liaised with these contributors, but it's really their work that we had the privilege of representing. And oops, something's going on here. Questions. We have time for questions. And I just want to say that before we take any questions, that these slides do have references that inform some of the things that were spoken about in this keynote. I hope that it was really useful. Before we take questions, and I think we might have a minute, I just wanted to take a moment to do an exercise that I got from a colleague of mine, Dr. Jessica Wolf, and it's called Chatterfall. And if we could just sort of utilize the chat box briefly to describe something specific that you learned from this presentation. However, when you type it into the chat, please do not hit return until you're signaled. I see hands, that means there's questions. Ooh, I hope that they're questions I can answer, or I'm gonna have to send you an email afterwards. But if we could put something into the chat that briefly describes something that you learned from the presentation. However, do not hit return until we have the countdown. So I'm going to give 30 or 40 seconds for people to put something into the chat. And please do not hit return, because we're hopefully going to see this cascading of ideas and thoughts and sentiments and gleanings happen at the same time. So I'm going to ask if Rita, you'd like to do the countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, in a couple of seconds, and we can see what comes in, if you'd like to do that. If I don't hear from you, it means that I'll do it.
Actually, I'm going to do one thing since you brought it up. I'm going to do one thing first. And I'm putting in the chat the winners of the book. This is the book raffle that Jonathan just mentioned. So if your name is listed, you will be having a book sent to you. We'll just need your email address so we can get your snail mail address, and you'll be getting a copy of the What It Takes book. So now, ready? set, 3, 2, 1, go.
Oh, look at that. It's like a waterfall. Ooh, nice. Very nice. And see, we even keep our promises. 5 people want a book. So we're not just talking. Well, this is going to be great. I'll look at this later and see what you learned. Or maybe sometimes we should say, what didn't you learn that you wanted to learn? Because, that can be just as informative. I've learned that about these presentations, is that, it is the lens that somebody may say, hey, I would have liked to have heard this. And what's good about that is next time we can include it. So, feedback is feedback. And sometimes we see it based on kind of where we might be. I hate to say that because I hate when people say it to me, but all feedback can be really useful, even if it's to understand that that person sounded kind of mean. Maybe they're having a hard day. Maybe they need a hug. That's useful feedback, right? All right, so keep these coming. Wow. Yes, water cascades, and then sometimes it comes down in droplets, but it's all water. It's all good. It's all feedback. So thank you so much. I truly enjoyed sharing this with you. I thank Rita for asking me to step up and to do this keynote. And I hope at some point in the near future that we can be together in a room, a physical room, and I can see your faces. But thank God for technology that we're able to reach so many people and engage so many people and be together and still knowledge share. So thank you. Thank you so much.
So, my goodness, I thought this day would never come. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Wonderful, wonderful keynote, and just so educational, informative, inspirational. There's so many things that I could say about your keynote, and I just really want to express my appreciation for our working relationship through the years. It's been an amazing collaboration, and we are still at it. We're coming up with new things all the time. We won't share them yet, but there's some really interesting things that we have on the horizon. And in fact, we'll be doing some work with the National Association on a few upcoming things. So just a reminder for those of you that are seeking continuing education, watch for an email from the Alliance for Rights and Recovery. They're handling all the continuing education for us. In that email, you'll see a workshop, or actually keynote evaluation. You'll need to complete that evaluation within 48 hours to be eligible for continuing education. But even if you're not seeking continuing education, we really encourage you just take a few minutes to fill out the conference evaluation or the workshop evaluation. We share that information with our presenters. It's really helpful for them to especially get affirmations, which I know all of you are putting in the chat. It helps to have it also in the conference evaluation, and anything that we can be doing differently or better for next time around, because this is our first supervision summit. New audience for many of us. So those of you that are appreciating this would really like to hear both the appreciation and anything that we could be doing differently. Again, to access your next session, you'll go to your conference program and click the link on the final summit program for that particular workshop. Really encourage you, if you want to learn more about the 5 functions or learn more about the know, nothing, none that Jonathan talked about in the beginning, our session will be immediately following this. But there's just so much great information. So we will be recording the session. We expect the recording to be available within 30 days. We'll be posting the slides, the presentation slides, and any additional information that Jonathan is willing to share with us about the 5 functions, especially the research that's been going on. So again, thank you for your participation in this inaugural PeerTAC Supervision Summit, and we hope to see you at another presentation somewhere along the line. And if you have any last comments or questions that you want to throw in the chat, great. You can obviously come over to the next session and ask questions there as well. Thank you again, Jonathan and Taina, for kicking this off.